Grim Dawn crossbow builds, yeah.
Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome to Grim Dawn Crossbow Builds, where all we talk about are crossbow builds for Grim Dawn. Our hero today is a warder, which is the combination of a soldier and a shaman. This is the first soldier build on this channel. We're using the mythical Korvan Wyrm crossbow, which fully converts the lightning damage from Primal strike into physical damage and gives it a bunch of internal trauma. This physical Primal strike is supported by Cadence and deadly momentum. Let's go for a dummy kill. On left click is Cadence. We have War Cry for physical resistance reduction, and on right click is Primal strike fully converted to physical damage. As you can see, our single target damage is quite good on this build. Let's go through our skills. Our main attack is Cadence, which is nearly hard capped and bound to Assassin's Mark for physical resistance reduction. Its modifier Fighting Form is fully hard capped, giving us a bunch of bleeding damage and a wider attack arc for Cadence. Deadly Momentum is also close to the hard cap, buffing all of our attacks, including the cooldown Primal Strike attack. Our resistance reduction comes mainly from War Cry, which is bound to Rend for bleeding resistance reduction. Its modifier Break Morale is close to the hard cap, giving us 43 reduced targets physical resistance. Since we're using a default attack replacer, we get to use weapon pool skills, so we have a point in Markovian's Advantage, buffed to 8 by our gear, and bound to Olzad's Decree. Zulhan's technique also has a single point in it, buffed up to 6, and it's bound to Falcon Swoop. We have 1 point in Fighting Spirit for extra damage and OA when we're being attacked. 1 point in Military Conditioning for extra physique and health. It's usually worth putting more points into this skill, but our health is already above 20,000 hit points. Then we've got 1 point in Veterancy, giving us extra health regen. 12 points in Field Command for extra OA, DA, and armor, and 12 points in its modifier Squad Tactics. This is mainly for the extra attack speed. Decorated Soldier is above the soft cap so that we can overcap our elemental resistances easily, and it also gives bonus physical damage. And Scars of Battle is a little bit over the soft cap, primarily for the stun and freeze resistances. On the Shaman side, our main skill is the cooldown version of Primal Strike fully converted to physical damage. That's almost at the hard cap as well. We've got 1 point in Torrent and 1 point in Storm Surge, which are also fully converted to physical damage by our gear, but because of our investment in Cadence, we don't have the skill points to race these up further. At the top, Brute Force is a big damage and health bonus for using a two-handed weapon. This flat lightning damage is also converted to physical. And there's 1 point in Feral Hunger to round out our weapon pool skills. This is boosted up to the soft cap by our gear, and it's bound to Maul. On the bottom we have the Mondrogan's Pact Aura, giving us extra physical damage and health regen. This is bound to Giant's Blood for even more health regen. Heart of the Wild is close to the soft cap for health and a reduction in poison and bleeding duration. And Oak Skin is also close to the soft cap for extra DA and armor and ether resistance. Lastly, our exclusive aura is Primal Bond. I chose this over Oleron's Wrath because of the damage absorption and the bonuses to bleeding damage. Let's take a look at our devotions. This is a fairly modest devotion path which doesn't take any tier 3 constellations. A nice way to start this is with a point in yellow so you can pick up the tortoise. That has a nice damage absorption proc which will help keep you alive. Then you can take a point in green and pick up the falcon. This proc works well on weapon pool skills. With the tortoise and the falcon in place, you can pick up the assassin's blade. The assassin's mark proc is very important for this build for the physical resistance reduction. I also picked up a handful of other tier 1 constellations in the early game. The lizard for blue points and health regen. The spider for green points and attack speed. And the owl for reflected damage reduction and some resistances. I wound up leaving the owl in place, as you can see, because we need as much reflected damage reduction as we can get on this build. We're doing a lot of internal trauma and bleeding damage, and that's going to kill us real fast without reflect resist. With those in place, I was able to go up to the top and take the Kraken for two-handed weapon bonuses. This is assuming you're using a two-handed weapon in the early game, which if you're following this guide you probably will be. I also took the Dire Bear for stun and freeze resistance and a pretty sweet proc. The damage itself is not impressive, but the armor reduction on enemies makes a big difference. After that, I went back to the crossroads and stuck a point in red so that I'd have the 3 affinity points needed for the Hydra. This is great for any ranged build, so it's on most of my builds. And in this case we can use the flat physical damage with no conversion. That goes straight into our Cadence and Primal Strike hits, which is very nice. I also use the Behemoth in most of my builds because health regen is so powerful, and the proc is definitely a lifesaver. At this point I refunded the Spider, the Lizard, and the points in the Crossroads in order to take some larger constellations in the southeast. We're using Olzad Herald of Korvac for the resistances, the flat physical damage, and a very strong proc. Our final constellation was the Huntress for bleeding resistance reduction. Let's talk about our items. Our weapon is the mythical Korvan Wyrm, which is most notable for its full physical conversion of Primal Strike. It also gives +2 to all of our skills and global elemental to physical conversion. In the helm, chest, and shoulder slots we're using pieces of the Warborn Bastion. This set is geared towards physical cadence, which serves our purposes perfectly. The chest and shoulder pieces complete our global lightning to physical damage conversion, and the helm reduces the cooldown on Warcry, ensuring that we have good uptime on our physical resistance reduction. The set bonuses also give us flat physical damage, attack speed, and armor absorption. This set, combined with the Scars of Battle skill, means that we only need a single component to reach 100% armor absorption, which gives us a lot of flexibility with our armor components. Our amulet is Mogara's Fangs, which is geared more toward Blade Arc, but I found one with really great affixes. Crushing gives a lot of extra flat physical damage. Combined with the flat damage on Mogdrogan's Pact, I found this to be very worthwhile. Our first ring is the mythical signet of Astral Ruminations. Try saying that 5 times fast. This is one of the few items that actually supports physical Primal Strike, with % physical damage and 2 points to the skill. Ring number 2 is the mythical Ring of the Black Matriarch, which we're using for the points in Cadence and for the proc Venom of the Black Matriarch, which gives a little bit of extra physical resistance shred. Our gloves are the Crimson Claws, which give Cadence a bigger attack radius, and also give bleeding and lifesteal to Feral Hunger. Our boots are the mythical Windshear Greaves, which allow us to hard cap fighting form, give us trap resistance, which is pretty hard to find, and also gives us a chance to avoid melee attacks. The armor values on these boots and gloves are pretty low, but we have so many armor bonuses that it winds up being very high anyway. Our medal is the Mark of the Farseer, which gives flat damage to Primal Strike and bleeding damage to Warcry. Several of these items, including the medal, the boots, and the helm, have blueprints, so these items are easier to get than it might appear. The medal blueprint you can buy from a faction vendor at the Conclave of the Three once you have the rep. Our belt is the mythical Guthook belt, with bleeding damage, attack speed, +2 to Feral Hunger, and +1 to all Shaman skills. I don't think there's a clear best-in-slot belt for this build, so feel free to try different things in this slot. The relic is also quite flexible. I wound up going with Serenity even though it's kind of boring because the reflected damage reduction is really important and hard to get. The Circuit Breaker also comes in handy since we don't have access to Minir's Will. The pants are the mythical leg wraps of the Tranquil Mind, which have a big spirit bonus, allowing us to get away with only 2 points in spirit, and +3 to our exclusive aura Primal Bond. The slow resistance and the slow effect on enemies are also quite nice. Let's talk about leveling. Cadence really sucks in Acts 1 and 2 before you have access to deadly momentum, so you probably want to start out as a shaman and use Primal Strike instead. The Hevil's great sword that you can find in Lower Crossing is a nice place to start. Cadence gets a lot more tempting when you're headed towards Homestead though. When you get to the Smuggler's Pass, you can pick up a Voldrax Crusher, which is guaranteed to drop from the boss there. This weapon is quite insane for a warder using two-handed Cadence. You can see that even at Endgame, it's showing much more damage than my crossbow. So it's definitely worth considering for your final build as well, if you like to play melee. But gosh darn it, this is a crossbow channel, so what I wound up doing was using the normal version of the Sanguinar. This is actually quite similar to our endgame weapon, although being an epic item it's not going to be as powerful. The Hemorrhage proc gives 20% bleeding resistance shred. It's got a normal, empowered, and mythical version, so this is definitely feasible for leveling this build. If you don't find one of these, you can also pick up a Rawari Scorpion from the Rovers. This is another nice physical and trauma damage crossbow. But let's be realistic, you're probably going to use the Voldrax Crusher because it's going to be way better than these other options. For your early game armor, the Rovers also have some good options. The Rawari grips give extra stats, attack speed, and elemental resistance, and the Rawari foot pads give lots of resistances and movement speed. When you start seeing flesh warped items around Homestead, you're probably going to want to use them. The flesh warped plate mail gives +3 to oak skin and nice defensive stats. The flesh warped pauldrons give +3 to cadence, and the flesh warped casque gives 50% of your weapon damage to your warcry. If you feel up to it, you probably also want to hunt down Gutworm. He drops this metal with +3 to deadly momentum and a bunch of bleeding damage to cadence. In Ugdenbog, be on the lookout for Ugdenbog girdles, which will boost all your soldier skills. This is a guaranteed drop from Caraxus, the crab boss.
Bask in my power.